Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go after the lefts, we go after the rights, we go after the middle and independents, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, October 9th, 2021, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before I do get started, we do try to make sure this is a family-friendly podcast. So we do try to watch our language on here, but unfortunately, words do fly, and sometimes things that may be shown may be intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, what's up besides my Don King haircut? Again, it takes a judge to do something that really should have been done by the Supreme Court. I am talking about blocking the abortion law in Texas.
Controversial new Texas law that had halted nearly all abortions in that state. Overnight, a federal judge temporarily blocking enforcement of that new law in a 113-page ruling. The judge saying the new law is flagrantly unconstitutional. Tonight, Texas promptly filing an appeal. So where does this go from here? And why many clinics are hesitant to reopen in that state. Tonight, Rachel Scott with the story of one young woman and her difficult decision, her journey in the middle of all this.
Tonight in Texas, supporters of abortion rights cheering the federal judge's ruling, putting a temporary hold on the most restrictive abortion law in the land.
We reached out to some of the patients that we had on a waiting list to come in to have abortions today.
The law bans abortion after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, and it deputizes everyday citizens to file lawsuits against anyone they say aids or abets an abortion, from the doctor who performs the procedure to the Uber driver who takes the woman to a clinic. And if they win, they get a bounty of at least $10,000. But now, as legal challenges make their way through the courts, Judge Robert Pittman putting the law on pause, ruling that because of its unprecedented and aggressive scheme, women have been unlawfully prevented from exercising control over their lives in ways that are protected by the Constitution. And since the law went into effect, most Texas women seeking abortions have had to leave the state to get one. I sat down with Maddie, a 21-year-old college student, the day before she traveled to Mississippi for the procedure.
At 6 weeks, you didn't even know you were pregnant.
Not even close. I was still living my life as regular and as carefree of a college kid as I could be.
She was on birth control, but by the time she took a pregnancy test and went to the doctor, it was too late to get an abortion under Texas law.
When she told me that I was measuring at 10.5 weeks, I just cried. I was heartbroken.
Did it sink in that moment that you would have to travel hundreds of miles to get an abortion procedure if you wanted to?
Yeah, the minute that they said how far along I was, I knew that this became 100 times more difficult, more expensive, and more time consuming.
Maddie started calling around to clinics in nearby states.
How many clinics would you say you called altogether?
Easily 30, if not more.
And most of them were booked.
Yeah.
She finally got an appointment in Mississippi, but when she got there, she was told the state has a mandatory waiting period. She had to go back to Texas and return to Mississippi the following week for the actual procedure. 2 separate trips.
What message do you have for the Texas lawmakers who backed this law?
My body is not their property. They should have no say in what I do with myself. I am in charge of myself in every possible way.
And Rachel Scott joins us live tonight from Houston. And Rachel, this law now on pause, but it's just one judge's ruling. The state of Texas now appealing this decision. Where does it go from here?
Well, David, the Texas Attorney General says this boils down to the sanctity of human life. He is appealing this to the Fifth Circuit. That is known to be one of the most conservative courts in the country. It could find itself in front of the Supreme Court. And even now, abortion providers in this state are hesitant to fully resume abortion procedures. One telling me tonight they cannot afford to take the chance. David?
So that screams a lot. Again, for all those that don't know, the great state of the Hold My Beer Championships, I'm talking about Texas, not everybody, just their legislature, decided to basically put forth an abortion law. An abortion law that sounds so crazy that it has to be written from Hollywood. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court saw the law and said, you guys go ahead, it's okay. And strangely enough, considering that Roe versus Wade is still the law of the land for now, that it took a federal judge to do something that the Supreme Court should have done, which was sit there and say, okay, you can do all the laws you want. This is the federal law. Abortion is still legal. It's still a legal thing to get. And it's amazing to me that a federal judge had to stop in and look at this law and say, this is unconstitutional. You're basically forcing women into The Handmaid's Tale. For all those that know, it's on Hulu. Check it out. But you're forcing women into The Handmaid's Tale is what you're doing. So, again, I have been saying this on two fronts. I have been saying this from the Supreme Court being overly conservative, that I sat there and said that was going to be a problem when Kavanaugh and Barrett got basically bum rushed in the Supreme Court under Trump's administration. I said it would be a problem when Trump rubber stamped a whole bunch of judges into the lower courts. I'm not trying to call this, but again, I call this. Trump's stench may be gone, but his imprints are still there. The Supreme Court that he helped get put in, the lower courts, the lower judges in those lower courts that he just went ahead and knocked off and that the Republicans signed off on, this was all premeditated. And so now it becomes a problem. And again, no matter how you cut the mustard, because I've had multiple arguments with the so-called pro-life people, and I had to explain to them, you're not really pro-life. You're pro-birth, yes, but you're not pro-life. Because if you were pro-life, you would actually be protesting a lot of things. But for the simple fact of the matter that you're only protesting about the unborn, what about the unborn baby? That's always the gripe. The unborn child. And one of my favorite comedians, the late George Carlin, said it best. Pro-life people are funny because they only care about the child up until they're born. And when they're born, they're on their own. True story. I mean, that's how a lot of them are. They care until the child is born. And then once the child is born, it's like, yeah, go get a job. But again, just to refocus this, it goes back on women that, again, most women don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. Most women don't. Most women find out well along, like maybe 12 or 13 or 14 when they go visit the doctor or when they miss their period. But 6 weeks, no woman knows. Not at that point to pay enough attention. But now you're going to have a lot of women in Texas being very, very cautious now. Just because, again, for some people, they have this thing about abortion, and I'm going to be honest, and whether or not this makes you continue to watch this podcast or not, it's up to you. Abortion is probably the most responsible thing a woman can do when she doesn't want to be a parent. That's all I'm saying. If you don't want to be a parent, there's options. But if you're pissed off at the fact that a woman can exercise these options, then, well, keep it to yourself. Because, again, for me and on this show, we are definitely going to be pro-choice for women. A woman's body is her business. A woman's body is hers and her business alone. The choices and the consequences that a woman makes in her life does not affect me. I still go to bed soundly at night, and women can still do what they want to do, as they should, because you'll never see this type of thing put on men. You'll never see this type of thing put on men. I'm just going to be kind of honest with you. You will never see this type of thing put on men, because if you turn around and sit there and said men couldn't, how can I say this very nicely? Men cannot change the Miracle Whip jar every now and then. Go with that reference. If you told a man that he couldn't do that anymore, oh, there'd be riots in the streets. Get your hands off my body. And you'd be seeing all women go, oh, so when it's you, it's different. Okay. You would see that all the time. But it just goes to show you that some people look at The Handmaid's Tale and say, oh, that's a great show. For a lot of us, it's like, dude, that's becoming a reality. Just like for the simple fact of the matter, it always comes down to controlling women. I never understood that. I never understood that a bunch of guys in a room can tell a woman what she can do with her body and not be vice versa. I mean, we're supposed to be equal, right? But doesn't seem very equal in this case. But this does bring up an interesting point because, like I said, talking about conservative Supreme Courts, that CNN actually has a video of the Supreme Court nominees when they were first asked about abortion before being nominated to the court, and it's very interesting their views then versus now.
Woman's right to choose to terminate her pregnancy.
I have no reason or agenda to prejudge the issue or to predispose to rule one way or the other on the issue of abortion.
Roe versus Wade is the law of this country, at least for more than 20 years. Recently, the Supreme Court has reaffirmed that right in Casey versus Planned Parenthood. And so, in my opinion, that is settled law.
I think I should stay away from discussions of particular issues that are likely to come before the court again. And in the area of abortion, there are cases on the court's docket, of course. It is an issue that does come before the court.
It is a precedent that has now been on the books for several decades. It has been challenged. It has been reaffirmed. But it is an issue that is involved in litigation now at all levels.
Is Roe settled law?
That is the precedent of the court and settled in terms of the holding of the court.
I think that the continuing holdings of the court are that the woman's life and that the woman's health must be protected in any abortion regulation.
Do you view Roe as having super precedent?
Well, Senator, a super precedent is
in numbers, 44.
It has been reaffirmed many times. I can say
Yes.
that. Part of being a good judge is coming in and taking precedent as it stands. And your personal views about the precedent have absolutely nothing to do with the good job of a judge.
As a judge, it is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. By it, I mean Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Been reaffirmed many times. Casey is precedent on precedent, which itself is an important factor.
People use super precedent differently.
Okay.
The way that it's used in the scholarship and the way that I was using it in the article that you're reading from was to define cases that are so well settled that no political actors and no people seriously push for their overruling. And I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicates that Roe doesn't fall in that category. And scholars across the spectrum say that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Kind of scary, ain't it? That it's amazing that, again, these are all nominations, so they're all trying to sound, they're not trying to take, I mean, for most of them, I mean, Sotomayor said it best. That's the law. The law is the law on this one. And you can tell again, and I mean this ever so nicely, you can tell who are the progressive Supreme Court judges and the conservative ones by their answers. Again, it's amazing. Well, the precedent that was set. Why can't we just come in? Sotomayor said it best. That's the law. The law has been set. Simple. It is amazing as a judge, as a judge, more as a Supreme Court judge, why the long-winded answer? When Sotomayor said it best. She said it completely best. That is the law. That is the law of the land. That's what we're going with. So, again, why do you hear Clarence Thomas, well, he doesn't, because you know why? And it's funny, then and now, Clarence Thomas will sit there and say that he's against abortion. You will hear Chief John Roberts, the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, kind of dance back and forth. Oh, I've lost my Supreme Court. No, it's in your favor, sir. Because if we go back and see your answer, well, you dance around more than a boxer does. You dance around more than a football cheerleader. You dance around more than half the cast of Dancing with the Stars. It is not surprising that when you go back and you see the opinions of these Supreme Court justices as their nominees, turn around and try to sit there and say, oh, well, we have better thoughts of abortion. No, you don't. You're just being honest. Now you're just being honest. You're being honest because there's more of you now. Because if it was just one of you who were against abortion, if one of you who said abortion shouldn't happen, but the rest of the Supreme Court justice said no, abortion should be legal, then you'd be silent. But now the other people on the other side of you, now all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this is how we feel. Again, this is why I sit there and say, this is why, guys, I sat there and said, I worry. I worry when the opposition is imbalanced, or when it's in a, you know, I can sit there and go all day about extreme conservative views, because there are some, considering that there are some conservative views that are actually welcomed, but there's some extreme conservative views that should be ignored. In the same sense, with Democrats, it's like there are some Democratic views that are accepted, but there are also some extreme left Democratic views that, again, should be ignored. But when you have an overbearance in the Supreme Court that literally is an attack on women, you basically just have the Handmaid's Tale. You really do. We're not that too far off from it. That's all I'm saying. But moving forward, guys, there's a thing that also that has been said in the news is the debt ceiling. And again, the debt ceiling is coming up again, and Congress does what it does best: kicks the can down the road.
From deadlock to deal, what are you learning?
Yeah, short-term deal, and it's unclear how this is going to be dealt with in the long term, and essentially a kick the can down the road, if you will. This is an extension of the national debt limit up until December 3rd. This deal would actually extend the borrowing limit to about $480 billion. That's how much debt will be racked up, the Treasury Department believes, from now, essentially, up until early December. And this sets up a larger fight come that time. We'll be right back at it, because at that time, December 3rd is the same deadline that government funding needs to be extended. If they don't extend government funding, the federal government, federal agencies will shut down. And this is the same situation that Congress was just over the last several weeks. They initially agreed to a short-term increase of the government funding to keep the government open until December 3rd. Then the Republicans and Democrats battled for weeks in this staring contest about how to raise the national debt limit. This is a politically toxic vote. Democrats said they were willing to move forward, but Republicans had disagreed about the process they were using. They were engaged in this procedural dispute for weeks, up until Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, decided to change course, offering a short-term solution. In the interim, Democrats accepted that after a day of negotiations. Schumer and McConnell cut this deal. So, Kate, Congress averting this immediate crisis, potentially the first ever debt default, but can they do it again come December? That's going to be the big question, as once again, lawmakers may have their backs up against the wall.
You know, there's two things I took from this. A lot of people may not know about the debt ceiling. Now, just to give a quick explanation, the debt ceiling is basically Congress's budgeting.
Well, this just in to CNN. We are learning that a U.S. nuclear-powered submarine hit something.
I was going to laugh. A nuclear-powered submarine hits something underwater, and that kind of knocks you moron. Anyway, sorry. Sometimes CNN plays faster than I can speak. So what I was going to get at is that there's two things from the debt ceiling that a lot of people don't get. Number one, the debt ceiling itself is Congress's account balance. If they hit the debt ceiling, then, and without an actual plan, government shuts down. Now, I don't need to tell you guys that in this day of the pandemic area, that government shutting down, which means that all government services, unemployment, things of that nature, will be halted. At this point, no one can afford to lose any government-ran services at this moment, especially if you're depending upon them. So, again, for the simple fact of the matter, guys, it amazed me so that not only about the debt ceiling, but how quickly Democrats and Republicans passed a stopgap measure, which means that it's just kicking the can down the road. Something that Congress does a lot. They kick the can down the road. But it amazed me so that, again, this goes back to this grand issue that Democrats are trying to push through a $3.5 trillion package. Republicans, like in their usual thing, are not helping and will be a roadblock at any point in the way. It gets to a point to where a decision's got to be made. Kicking the can down the road just means that either this administration or the next one or the one after this, somebody's got to make a hard decision, and that hard decision is, do we invest more in our infrastructure? Do we invest more in our people? Do we invest more in America in order to get ourselves running? Or are we going to play this whole game of the market will take care of itself? And again, when it comes to the debt ceiling, I still point this out. And I say this because Republicans, all they're doing is waiting the midterms. Midterms are not that far off now, as we're in October. Another couple of months will be in December, and it won't be long till we're in 2022, which kind of feels like, this whole year feels like 5 years instead of 1 year, but I digress. But the whole idea of it all is Republicans are not trying to do anything right now, except abstain, obstruct, and deny. Pretty much like Trump right now. But it amazes me so that Democrats are trying to move forward. But again, as I spoke in the previous podcast this Wednesday, they got a couple of roadblocks of their own in the form of Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. So that's another issue. So while you have all of this going on, you're sitting there wondering to yourself, we are basically the ping pong balls in the middle of this political table. So at this point, it just makes no sense that we don't have a deal in place. And Democrats are going to take a little bit of the heat for that, because again, they weren't united. And the one thing I will say about Republicans that they do get right is that when it's time to toe the party line, they have no issue with that. None. I mean, you might have a few people that might grope and complain, but when it comes down to bottom line and getting votes done, everybody's all in. Happened with Kavanaugh, happened with Barrett, happened with passing Trump's supposed tax plan, which millionaires, billionaires, and corporations love so much. Yeah, that tax plan, which, by the way, still in effect. Still wondering why it's not been repealed by now. But again, this is, like I said before, it's just a little hard to understand when, if the Democrats want to maintain a majority and going into the midterm elections, maintain the House and the Senate, it's either two people got to get on board or two people got to show the true colors. One of the two. And I keep thinking Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, for the lack of better words, just might as well be Republican light at this point. But moving right along, guys, I want to cover this story because an ESPN commentator, again, I know it's funny when you say ESPN commentator and it's always followed up by something they said. Unfortunately, it's not Rachel Nichols this time. It's Sage Steele, and her comments on Jay Cutler's podcast are, Kanye-like.
Why is it so important to you to say that you're biracial? I'm like, because my mom's white, she's Irish Italian, and my dad's black, and I'm like, why not? Like, I actually feel like I have the best of both worlds. Barack Obama chose black, and he's biracial. I'm like, well, congratulations to the president. That's his thing. I think that's fascinating, considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him. But hey, you do you. I'm going to do me.
Joining us now to talk about this is Carrie Champion. She is the host of Stick to Sports, Naked with Carrie Champion, and a former ESPN anchor. Carrie, your reaction to this on Twitter caught our eye. You said in part, my dad wasn't around when I was younger. I'm still black. I wonder what you felt when you heard Sage Steele saying that.
I think two things that were happening. As you mentioned, even in describing who she is, she's very popular. She is really well known. And I think a lot of people, myself included, before I even started working at ESPN, Sage was considered a role model in a lot of ways for a lot of young brown girls. And so I think the reason why you're hearing so much about this in the community is because it's disappointing. And I think a lot of people, regardless of her experience or how she chooses to identify, for many years related to Sage as the brown girl at ESPN, or someone they could look up to or they could aspire to be like. And my reaction was simply disappointed because, first of all, it implied so many things that were hurtful. And it also shows that there's just a lack of unawareness on her part. And there was no one there to say, that sounds a little strange, don't you think, Sage, for you to say that about the former president? And it's actually disrespectful.
I also want to listen to, she talked about a lot of things and she's caught a lot of flack for many of the things she said. One was about female reporters that she has worked with. Let's listen to that.
I do think as women, we need to be responsible as well. It isn't just on players and athletes and coaches to act a certain way. I mean, I've had talks with young women who would come in and they'd intern with me, with our channel, or just other women who reach out to me now. And I've said to a couple of them, they're like, well, would you look at my tape? Would you do this? And I've said, listen, I would love to, but the way that you present yourself is not something I want to be associated with.
Yeah.
So when you dress like that,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you deserve the gross comments, but you know what you're doing when you're putting that outfit on too.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's dumb. I don't have any other eloquent way to say that. Here is the thing. She clearly has an issue with women, but I'll say this, and it may be controversial. Her statements, while being anti-Black or making it seem as if she doesn't want to be associated with Black people because they've been mean to her or whatever she has said in the past, probably would not have been a big issue, but now she's anti-woman, and that's just a no-no. How do you tell a young girl you don't like the way she's dressed, so I don't want to mentor you or look at your tape? That's the absolute opposite of what anyone wants to hear. This business, especially in sports, which you even know what you do, this business in particular, which is a male-dominated business, really doesn't lend itself to be friendly towards women. So if you have a woman who's at the top of her game saying she's not going to help another woman because of the way she's dressed, to me, all that does is push us further down. And it's very cultural. There is this mentality that there can only be one. And she upholds that in so many ways. And here's the thing, though. I find myself in between this role of should I be compassionate towards her or should I just let her have it? Because clearly something's not right here. And I've struggled with both because I know her. I've worked with her. These comments aren't shocking to me, they're shocking to people. And now all of a sudden, she wants to talk about it in a way in which she thinks that she has taken the moral high ground. And quite frankly, all she's done is separated herself and put a division between women in a business that already puts a division between us. That makes it hard for us to get along because we feel as if we have to compete. And it's so disappointing. First, you talk about she's talking about the president and wondering why he's not checking Black. Why he is and not biracial. What are you talking about? Like, just listen to that in itself. What are you saying? And then last but not least, we have so many, like myself. Like I said earlier, I really did look up to her. There was a point in time where I thought, this is it. She's the pinnacle. She's made it. And she's so anti everything that we stand for if we want to try to make it in this business.
Yeah, it is a tough business, right? And it is about reaching down for people who are coming along and helping them out. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, move over, Candace Owens. You have a new contender in the raccoon community. Sage Steele, again, it is... You know what? It is amazing, at the same time interesting with the opinions of these people who have mainstayed on grand stages like ESPN, like SportsCenter and things of that nature, and yet when it comes to their personal lives, they pull a Kanye. We shouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's funny the answers that Carrie Champion was giving. She was like, I am not surprised by this at all. So she is aware. She was aware of this, but at the same time, you just hear you hear Sage Steele just go, just spit the most illogical stuff and then wonder why ESPN decided to part ways with her. Why? Because ESPN has already done this with several other anchors. It shouldn't be surprising now. Although her rhetoric sounds very, very male oppressed, if you will. Because again, the whole thing about, well, if you dress this way, you knew what you were doing. It's always that argument. If you dress this way for that type of attention, you knew what you were doing. And I just felt like that is by far the dumbest thing you can say. On top of the fact of the matter that you try to put down, Obama put himself as Black, but he's really biracial. And that has what to do with today's society? It's beyond stupid. So I can see why ESPN canned her. Also, another person that should be canned is, I don't think this person's going to get canned because it's North Carolina. North Carolina lieutenant governor decided to he decided to be honest about what he feels about the LGBTQ plus community. And again, we should be concerned because he felt bold enough to say this.
We have got to wrestle this away from those folks. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it is flat out child abuse. Take your children and tell them they have to attend school. Don't have a choice. And then some of them will tell them they don't want you to have a choice where they go to school. You have to send your children here to school. Then when they get there, what do they teach them? Teach them a bunch of stuff about how to hate America. Teach them a bunch of stuff about why they're racist. Teach them a bunch of stuff about transgenderism and homosexuality. I'm saying this now, and I've been saying it, and I don't care who likes it. Those issues have no place in a school. There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it that I called it filth, come see me and I'll explain it to you. It's time for us to stop letting these children be abused at these schools. And it's not going to happen till the people of God stand up and demand different. We have got to wrestle this away from those folks. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it is flat out child abuse. Take your children and tell them they have to attend school. Don't have a choice. And then some of them will tell them they don't want you to have a choice where they go to school. You have to send your children here to school. Then when they get there, what do they teach them? Teach them a bunch of stuff about how to hate America. Teach them a bunch of stuff about why they're racist. Teach them a bunch of stuff about transgenderism and homosexuality. I'm saying this now, and I've been saying it, and I don't care who likes it. Those issues have no place in a school. There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it that I called it filth, come see me and I'll explain it to you. It's time for us to stop letting these children be abused at these schools. And it's not going to happen till the people of God stand up and demand different.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and break down that piece of crap. So, again, that was the Lieutenant Governor or North Carolina, Mark Robinson. And if you're wondering, yes, he's a Republican. Well, obviously it's North Carolina. North Carolina stays being Republican. But this is why I sit there and say, when you hear stuff like that, that should be immediate, like, kick him out. That's his views. That's his views, and he's the second most powerful person in that state. Nope, gotta go. But again, this is why I sit there and say, guys, he started off the whole thing. He's starting off saying, "Well, they're telling you where you gotta send your children to go to school. It's called zoning. You don't like it? There's plenty of other options for education." He goes into the whole thing. When they finally get you to school, we're gonna teach them about homosexuality. We're gonna teach them about transgender. We're gonna teach them about this. Cool. That's being socially and culturally aware. It's those things along with history that should be taught to children, because if you teach them properly about history, they become better adults. But he's sitting there and saying that, about transgender issues, things of that nature. He called it it's filth. I'm gonna call it what it is. This is filth, and it's not. It's honestly from a pulpit of a church, he is basically being transphobic, homophobic, and tried to bang the gavel on God's people. Look, here's the one thing. I wish God would sometimes come down and be like, I didn't say any of this. So I'm just gonna be honest. So many religious people always sit there and say, God's people are not for this. But I always want to point this out. Isn't that the same God y'all follow that says love everybody, accept everybody as I accepted you? Yeah, but you tend to forget that part, because you still stick on the Old Testament stuff. But that's just me, elder's kid. I always want to point that out, but that's the reason why I don't go to church anymore. So, again, he should be, as a governor, he really, really should be a lieutenant governor. He should resign. He is letting his bias instead of the state's needs come forward. He should resign, especially if that's how he feels. Because what if a lot of his constituents are the very same, are part of those very same issues that he calls filth? Imagine if I always put it this way. Imagine if a lieutenant governor came out and pretty much said that all black people are exactly what we thought they were. So release slaves who did exactly what we thought we would do. They would be lazy, they would leech off the system, they would have kids, they would do all this stuff, they would incite violence, they were better off when we were controlling them. Now imagine if a lieutenant governor said those comments. Would he still be in office? That's all I'm saying. Oh, hey Doug, hope you're feeling better, man. Thank you for the shout out on that. Hope you're feeling better. But with that being said, that's why I said this lieutenant governor of all people should definitely be resigning. But it's North Carolina. North Carolina's Republican. The one thing about Republican people, they love Republican views. And the thing about it is, as a Republican person, if you hit these three things, if you hit God, you hit country, and you hit good old American apple pie, you hit those three things, you're a star. I even said it best. If I turn around tomorrow and made this podcast so pro-Republican, I promise you, I would be on Fox News standing next to Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson as their token black person. No lie, I would. If I did that, if I went that route. Why? Republicans need minorities. They need minorities. The funny part is, when we really think about it, Republicans need black people. They do. They need your black people because, number one, they got to be able to sit there and say, I'm not racist, I do have a black friend. And number two, it actually helps them. It actually helps them in the polls area, which again, they're still, for most Republicans, it's pretty much a bunch of old grumpy white men. Except for Tim Scott, the one black Republican senator and the one black Republican senator in the entire Republican Party. Should tell you everything you want to know. Anyway, moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story as well. Again, some sadder news is just that the officer who shot Jacob Blake earlier this year, he was they did decide that they are not going to press charges against him. Unfortunately, with the federal civil charges, they have decided that they will not move forward with charging the officer. That again, he will unfortunately not be seeing any of the penalty. Now, again, for all those that don't remember, Jacob Blake was the man that was shot 7 times by officers as he was getting into his car. It was later found out that he did have a warrant and that there was a knife in the car. Now, again, this was him leaving and not being a threat to officers such as this person. And yet, when he was getting in the car, that's when the officers on the outside the window said they noticed the knife in the car, and that's when they proceeded to use lethal force. And I'm going to be honest about the situation. It's like, it always comes down to this. Like, again, when officers shoot a black man, and I said before, and I've said this before, it's character assassination. It's just like the current Ahmaud Arbery case. It's currently the George Floyd case in which Derek Chauvin's other co-defendants are about to be tried. Derek Chauvin's already been tried and found guilty. It's so many stories where when an officer shoots a black person that it becomes that we look more at the black person. And I've never understood that. Why look more at the black person when the officer was the one who pulled the gun? Now, in some instances where the officer had no choice but to use lethal force, and I actually showed earlier this year an issue to where the officer waited till the last moment to pull his gun. It actually happened here in Nashville at a traffic stop. The woman actually pulled the gun and shot the cop first. He fired back in response. I showed that in its full transparency, and I sat there and said these are one of the very few times we can't blame the officer for shooting because he actually was hit first. And people were calling for his badge. I'm like, wait a second. It's one thing to go after the officers who shot Jacob Blake because 7 times is excessive by any means. But to go after an officer who basically was calm, who tried to remain calm, and who was shot first by the assailant and he fired in response, I can't knock him. He did everything. That cop did everything that we as black people asked him to do. He remained calm. He tried to de-escalate the situation. He did not pull his gun. He did not seem threatening, and he tried to talk it all the way out until he couldn't talk anymore. I can't knock the officer back in Nashville for doing exactly what we asked him to do, versus an officer who is currently right back at his job, who shot and paralyzed a black man and will not see any charges. Why? Because the black man had a knife in the car and he had a felony warrant. But unfortunately, you still felt the need to pump 7 bullets into him. Explain it. That's all I can say. Explain it. Explain it, because I like I said, I see that and I'm like, having his knife being in the car that he was walking to, and that he was trying, in his response that he was trying to leave, that again, you felt the need to put 7 bullets into him. All I can sit there and say is explain, because it's not making any sense to me. But another story is coming out of Michigan where people are asking to use bottled water for drinking and cooking, and it's not Flint. Actually, that's actually where they said that's Benton Harbor, Michigan, in which they were again decided to pull water from the harbor, and the water actually has high levels of lead concentration. And again, for everybody that doesn't remember, Flint, Michigan was actually one of those places where they switched the water supplies, and because of the switch, and because of the fact that the pipes that were carrying water have been woefully under maintenance, that it did lead to the Flint protests as far as them getting water, as far as better water conditions, things of that nature. And Flint, Michigan is still without clean water. So this goes to show you that Benton Harbor, also in Michigan, has experienced the same issues. This is exactly the reason why that infrastructure bill that the Democrats are trying to pass right now makes so much sense. Because for the simple fact of the matter, guys, they need this. I have been saying for the longest time, America has ignored the infrastructure of pipes, of coaxial, of fiber optics, roads, bridges, buildings, dams. We can keep going down the list of all the structures that have been ignored by America for so long. Hence why the infrastructure bill needs to be done. Hence why we need to, that Build Back Better America plan. Yeah, you should also cut down the military and cut down the Pentagon's funding. And you can also reverse the Trump's tax cuts. That alone, if you've done that, and actually stop cutting into other services and actually cut from the Pentagon, because I will say this all the time, the Pentagon has been given a blank checkbook but has never passed one audit. Not one. They could not account for 1 cent of the money that they use, and that alone should tell you everything you want to know. But also, that's the reason why the Pentagon the defense budget should be cut. Should be. They don't need this. They don't need this blank check like they usually get. And at the same time, the plan that's being put that the Democrats are trying to pass would help situations just like Benton Harbor. It would, because it needs to be done. How long are we gonna keep doing this until catastrophic failure? Because trust me, there have been some bridges that have collapsed, especially important bridges that go over water and go over certain states, that cannot, above all else, be ignored. All I'm asking for is how long it's going to take. Because you're going to see a lot more stories like Flint, like Benton Harbor going to pop up. And it's only because the simple fact of the matter, guys, is just that they've been ignored for so long. But speaking of things that are going to get ignored, I hate to say this, but Fahrenheit 451 may have had a point. Right along up there with 1984 and right along there with Kill a Mockingbird. Why? Because basically in Texas, again, Texas, the current reigning king of the Hold My Beer, are saying that schools in a certain town in Southlake, Texas are going to restrict classroom libraries because of their inappropriate content. I cannot make this up. Inappropriate content. Excuse me, inappropriate content from a library? Are you kidding? Apparently, the independent school district, the Carroll Independent School District in Southlake, Texas, is pretty much telling teachers to review the books that they put out to make sure that they are not upsetting anyone. I cannot make this up. The books that they talked about so far, this book is Anti-Racist by Tiffany Jewell, which again, she was told by a mother who said the book violated her family's moral and faith. The book is Anti-Racist, which basically talks about racism and the fact that how it comes in many forms, violated her family's morals and faith. I will never understand that because the book doesn't. It's just like, for example, Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is basically the future that these parents and school teacher people are really wanting, which is the burning of books because we don't want that knowledge shared. Even a movie, The Book of Eli, was about basically reading about the Bible being used as a weapon because, again, that was knowledge. That certain people did not want that knowledge to fall in other people's hands because it would disrupt their way of life. I've never understood that. Books like that are supposed to be read because we need to expose our children to this type of things, to be socially and culturally aware. To Kill a Mockingbird, War and Peace, Animal Farm, 1984, Fahrenheit 451. I could keep going down the list. The Hate You Give. I can keep going down the list. Why? Because these books right here show, it's basically an author showing a time to where America wasn't all bright and spangly. It wasn't. To Kill a Mockingbird is racist. Yes, that is the entire point of the book. Fahrenheit 451 disavows knowledge. Yes, that is the entire point of the book. Because sometimes art imitates life and life imitates art. This is one of those times to where an author wants to use a story to illustrate a point, especially in The Hate You Give. Illustrated the point very nicely. But you have schools now that are saying, well, this violates my family's morals and faith. I've never understood that excuse. Morals and faith. I remember a long time ago when I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which is going to make me seem very old. I'm almost 40, but still, I remember To Kill a Mockingbird. And I remember some parents then didn't like the fact we were reading it. But at the same time, because I love to read books, it intrigued me. Because it showed the South exactly not too far from where we are now. Honestly, we haven't came that far. I mean, it's basically To Kill a Mockingbird because, again, you seeing this through a child who is seeing a racist time. And yet, art imitates life. But I will never understand schools that want to keep those kids from learning because, number one, teachers are inclined to make sure. Teachers actually have one of the greatest professions in my mind because you have a responsibility and duty to shape young minds. But you also have a duty to expose them to the world so that way they're better people. They need to be exposed to history. They need to be exposed to history and literature. They need to be exposed to these books. Why? Because the simple fact of the matter is, the more that you teach history, or even though history is part of it. If you do teach history the right way, people learn from it. But if you show the books that literally shape our country to where they should be shaping our country, you're going to get better, productive people of society because they're aware. They're aware to know to do better, not to be ignorant, not to offend your fallacies. Because for a lot of people, it's kind of BS. You're mad because those books exist because they're different from your opinion. That's what you really should say. But again, I digress. The simple fact of the matter is that Fahrenheit 451 right now is currently happening in Texas. It's also happening in other southern states as well. Keep in mind I said southern states, not states up north. Just pointing that out. The last story I got, guys, before we get to our feel good segment is honestly a different perspective in policing. And I know a lot of people sit there and, like myself, say that, defunding the police is a great idea as far as reorganizing, teaching, and actually taking some of the funding that they get from law enforcement that is pretty much turning into privatizing the small armies can be used to reinvest in the community, and actually by reinvesting in the community you actually lower crime rates, which makes it easier on cops. But in this case, this approach that these officers are taking involving African Americans, I just thought that was kind of interesting to watch.
Jefferson. Even before I started this academy, I always wondered, am I going to get pulled over one day and get shot or get killed by a police officer that's not having a good day? That honestly runs through my head each and every day, you know. I can become a police officer, but still though, it's the color of my skin that is what some police officers look at. I already know you're gonna have some people call, say, oh, you're Uncle Tom, or you're one of them now. What made you do it?
You got the tools, use them correctly.
Before, I wanted to do it, get the experience. But now, since we've had the George Floyd situation and the Michael Brown situation, I got a more different outlook and a better goal.
None of the scenarios that we're doing, you guys have not covered. You guys should be well versed on how to handle just about every call that comes down the pipe. 962 respond to a domestic in progress involving one couple and neighbors in the area. It's turning into a large disturbance.
Okay, what you say, what you do, you ain't never ready for it. You start me back up, please. Around the age of 10, 12 years old, that's when I realized I wanted to be a police officer.
You're not coming on this bed.
A police officer is somebody their job is protect and serve.
Drop the gun.
This program is a HBCU program from a historic black college. They take you through scenarios and they bring in their own actors and they play out real events and you gotta solve that situation.
Put the gun down, please, sir.
There you go, now come on out here.
Thank you. One of the things that I was proud about you guys tonight, oftentimes we find people that get too complacent and want to use that stuff on their little Batman belt, thinking that everything on your little Batman belt is going to solve all your problems. The best weapon you have is here and the ability to think through a process.
Andre Jefferson is one of 9 recruits who are part of the inaugural class of Lincoln University's Police Academy.
Rebecca Wilson has an order of protection against Mr. Hunter?
That is correct. She has an active order of protection against Mr. Hunter.
Lincoln is the first HBCU to ever have a police academy.
We're a historically black college, and so I thought that putting a police academy here would be a good way to increase our minority footprint in law enforcement.
The American police force is predominantly white. Only 12% are black, and only 15% are women nationwide.
When I started in '97, I believe, and I was one of 2 black males out of 26 in that police academy. It's important for us to look like the communities we serve.
The program was created by Lincoln University Police Chief Gary Hill following the death of George Floyd, and it focuses on a community-based style of policing.
This academy teaches us, yes, every call you get, you're gonna get that adrenaline rush, That situation is already amped up. And if you come on scene amped up, then you're gonna amp that situation up even more, which can lead to somebody getting shot, somebody getting hurt, somebody getting killed.
Police training in the United States isn't regulated, and the majority of academies focus on an outdated military style of policing. But at Lincoln University, Chief Hill puts an emphasis on de-escalation strategies in his curriculum.
On the domestic, we need to care about what? The victim. That's the most important. Everything we do is geared towards community policing. We need to treat everyone consistently, regardless of what they look like. In our practical exercises, we actually stick them in situations to where people aren't going to be so nice to them. And it is their job to de-escalate the situation. Hey, yeah, go back home. Listen to him. He said go back. A question that people have often asked, is there racism in policing? Yes. The answer is unequivocally yes.
I'm juggling the thought of me being on duty as a police officer versus me being off duty as a police officer and fearing for my life, especially with the racist, some racist officers or some officers that just don't care about you or care for you or your kind.
In 2020, there were over 1,100 killings by police, with Black people being 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people.
Whenever we hear about a police shooting, we're all holding our breath until we find out the race of the officer and the race of the person that was involved.
Y'all been brainwashed. When you got badge come up, they don't respect you. They'll beat your ass just like they beat me.
For the last couple of years, since Michael Brown in Ferguson, we're holding our breath to see what we're about to deal with next.
I'm tired of watching us die. We need justice.
The origin of policing in the U.S. can be traced to slave patrols, created in the 1700s to enforce slavery laws that controlled the lives of enslaved people. Slave patrols were also in charge of locating and returning slaves that had attempted to escape.
From the slave patrols to where we are now, you have witnessed the change. We're making strides. It's just not happening fast enough. And I think until we educate each other and talk about what has actually happened in our country and everyone have a firm understanding of what has happened to get us to this point, we're just spinning our wheels.
I would be more on the line of, it wouldn't be defunding the police, it would be holding officers more accountable for what they've done. Instead of, oh, okay, I'm just gonna suspend you for a certain amount of days and you're back on duty.
Reporting data of use of force to the FBI is voluntary for police agencies, but Mapping Violence has tracked that 98.3% of killings by police from 2013 to 2020 have not resulted in officers being charged with a crime. In the summer of 2020, cries to defund the police rippled across the globe. The movement is a call to re-examine funding for police departments and look into alternative methods to provide safety in communities.
I believe the term defund the police is definitely polarizing. We all want the same thing. We should have said, let's reallocate funds and establish units to deal with some of these issues that law enforcement officers shouldn't be dealing with. A lot of us don't have a degree in sociology and psychology. I mean, we should literally be in school for probably about 10 years before we are allowed to do law enforcement work if this is what the public is continually asking us to be able to recognize and do. We know police needs to reform. We know we have problems internally and everything else. The Lincoln University Law Enforcement Training Program is a step in the right direction. I believe the more interest that we can draw from our minority communities into law enforcement, we could see a change.
Right now I'm about to just take some more practice tests. My test is today at 5 o'clock. This test determines if I'm about to be a police officer or not. Even the instructors that I encountered that are women, they told me, like, you're going to get it hard.
TA 353 on scene.
You're a woman in the police force, and also you're a Black woman, so you're going to get it even harder.
With a gray pickup truck for a door, no license plate. No license plate. All right, here I come.
I just got to stand my ground and know what I am doing it for. Don't let nobody, manipulate me to think something else of myself or make me think of another way to handle a situation. Like, I know right from wrong.
TA 353, how far is EMS?
To the family and friends who are here to celebrate with your loved ones.
I know I can't change the system, like, the whole system, but at least I can change, like, where I go to.
Tiaja Fairleigh.
No, I don't think the system would change me. Like, I'm never gonna let nobody change how I think or how I'm gonna act because I know how to treat people. Like, and that's the main thing. You just gotta know how to treat people with anything that you do.
Since graduation, Tiaja has been interning with Webster Groves Police Department in Missouri, and Andre has started his job as a police officer in Caruthersville, a city that lies in Missouri's Boot Heel along the Mississippi River.
What's up? Been out all night?
Nah, man. I just put my bag in the trunk, man, and went to the store, man, and came back.
It's natural. It's a natural feeling to me. I love it. Every time I come in, I was like, yeah. Let's see. Now I'm just counting down the years to retirement.
Oh, thank you. Good job. Oh, thank you.
with communities that has completely lost all respect, all trust, all everything for the police officers, that you got to be patient. We will never feel the pain that George Floyd's family felt. You don't know if that family, every time they look around, no matter where they go, no matter what city, state, anywhere they look, every time they see a person with a badge and a gun, they're looking like, my brother, my father, my uncle, my nephew, my cousin died in the hands of a police officer. That's what they're gonna see. And you gotta be ready to, whenever you come into interaction with them or whenever you're going to deal with a situation with them, you gotta be ready for that anger to come back out.
Black Lives Matter!
You have to be ready for that. Me, as far as being able to change the system, I am very hopeful. Only thing about it is I can't do it alone. It just can't be a individual person thing. Matter of fact, it will have to be a whole world thing. Each officer will have to want to change the system.
So that was an interesting perspective. I will say that. You know, that it's different every time I hear, because again, I'm one of those people that pretty much say F the police every chance I get. Because again, police mindsets are always the same. You know, if you don't like us, join us, or you know, you can't change the system unless you do it from within. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against those mindsets. As far as, you know, the only way I can change my neighborhood is to be a part of the change. I say that all the time. If you want to change your environment, you have to be the change and start from there. So I'm not knocking those who want to be police officers, especially if you're black, but understand it's gonna be harder for you. It's like it's gonna be a whole thing, like you said. You're gonna be called Uncle Tom. You're gonna be called this. You're gonna be called a raccoon. You're gonna be called everything under the sun. And at the same time, the young man in the video understands it. He understands that anger. He understands what black people, your people, are going to be saying every time they approach you and see you with a badge right next to Johnny Law. So it's interesting that it's an interesting dynamic because he understands that. But also when you hear their mentors, it's like, well, you know, they want us to, you know, be educated and have 10 different degrees before we can be a police officer if we go by what the country wants. And I thought that was a very crude remark because, again, we're not asking officers to be well-known psychologists, but look at what these other countries are doing. I always said it best, you have to train longer to be a nail technician than to be a law enforcement officer. You train longer in trade jobs to be certified and be masters of your craft before you can become longer than you can be a police officer. The longest tenure for a police officer in the United States is still 6 months or less. 6 months or less in the academy, and as long as you pass, you're a police officer. Less than half a year. And all we simply asked was the entire time was that we should make sure they're educated, which means that yes, you should have a degree. You should have a degree if you're going to be a law enforcement officer. You should have certified de-escalation training. You should have certified training for looking for specialized behavior. You know, just looking for those signs of someone is autistic or schizophrenic or things of that nature. You should be trained to look for those signs. And de-escalation, just because not everything has to go straight for the heat. Sometimes you can talk down a person off the ledge without actually pulling a gun on them. And at the same time, it's that whole thing of you cannot ask. Again, there has to be acknowledgement of community. A lot of these police officers, especially in Tennessee, police communities they don't live in. It's a little difficult to connect with the community if you're not living in the same community as, let's say, Mary as the community. But again, that goes to a whole other situation. And then let's not forget the blue wall of silence. Because in my mind, it goes right back to the January 6th committee where those Capitol police officers were testifying about what happened on that day. Those white domestic terrorists decided to raid the Capitol. And it is amazing to me the quietness of the police unions and the fraternal order police that day. the quietness of it all. But at the same time, a person goes testify and he gets the most dirtiest, racist, threatening to kill him voicemail ever. With that being said, it's a little hard to sit there and say that, to trust police officers, because yes, you have a difficult job. And yes, you do have to defund the protests, defund the police protests still ongoing, but it's not the way you think. But the road that this young black man and woman are going to take is going to be a difficult road. Now, there's nothing wrong with being the change in the community. If you are the change in the community that you try to make an impact, then as long as you are legit about it, then yes, that means that your community should change. It is going to be very difficult for you. Because again, police themselves aren't changing. You have people that want to come in and change the police force, but if you haven't noticed from a black mentor out there who was a police chief, his mindset hasn't changed at all. And that alone is very scary. So, with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment, because usually how the Frack we got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes just make you lose your faith in humanity. But hey, it's the weekend. It's sunny for now, and especially here in Tennessee. So again, we're going to leave you guys on the good note, give you some good vibes. And I hopefully found 3 stories that can do that, especially this first story, which basically is simply about giving somebody a shot that normally they wouldn't get anywhere else. Check it out.
Ongoing ABC News series America Strong, and we are about to hear from 2 sisters who started a nonprofit to employ individuals with disabilities. The Golden Scoop sells ice cream, baked goods, and coffee, and the one thing they can't put a price tag on, it's the joy that is spreading in Kansas City and beyond. Take a look.
I started 19 years ago working with individuals with disabilities. I approached my sister and asked her if she wanted to help me create a place that provided meaningful employment for individuals with disabilities. Currently, we have 21 Super Scoopers. Our goal is to mentor, inspire, and equip them to not only be successful in their jobs, but to be successful in their lives as well.
I think I am responsible. I'm just doing ice cream freezer and the cash register.
Cleaning the counters, the tables, the chairs, sweeping the floor.
We actually were able to open in April of this year, and the support from Kansas City was just amazing. We had lines out the door. We've had several customers come in saying, I've had a horrible day and I knew I could come to the Golden Scoop and leave with a smile on my face.
I haven't really had a job before, and this is my opportunity to serve ice cream to people and tell them how beautiful they look.
I always say, have a nice day. I always love to be here.
They're happy, they're reliable, and they're hardworking. In today's world where people are having a hard time hiring, they should seriously consider looking at the disabled community. They will go above and beyond for an employer.
And look at who we have now, some of the Super Scoopers from the shop. There they are, Allie, Abby, and Nicholas. You see the smiling faces and the waves. And you're there in the middle, Abby. Tell me, what is the highlight? What is the best part about being a Super Scooper?
My favorite part about being a Super Scooper is because I get to see all my friends all the time, and it's just awesome.
Well, we love the smile that you put on everyone else's faces. And so, you know what we heard here at GMA3 that you all are big fans of the Kansas City Chiefs. And so we gave them a call, and someone special wanted to congratulate all of you. Take a look.
Hey, it's Jamal Charles from the Chief. I heard y'all are big Chief fans. I want to congratulate to the Golden Scoopers for opening up in April of 21, and shout out to the Super Scoopers. Me and the Chief are so impressed. And also, I thank y'all for spreading joy in the community with ice cream. Go Chief.
Go Chiefs. And guys, that's not all, because I think Amber and Lindsay can hear me, and they're going to bring out part of the surprise. Go ahead and take it away.
What do you think?
Hi, guys. So Jamal and the Chief sent some swag as a thank you for all that you all do and putting so much joy into your community. Abby, I can see you're a little shocked there. How are you feeling? What do you think?
I'm excited.
Well, we're excited. You want to say something else?
I'm a huge fan of Good Morning America. I watch it all the time. And I'm guys.
Oh,
I love you guys.
We love you. We're huge fans of you. Thank you for making us smile. We hope that brings some joy into your life. You all certainly deserve it. Thank you for all that you do each and every day for brightening so many people's lives. And keep up all the good work.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I always thought that was pretty cool because, you know, when it comes to, I hate the word disabled. I hate the word special. I hate the word, you know, retarded, things of that nature. Because these are still great individuals, and for a lot of places they don't really hire folks like that. So it's always cool to actually see companies and small businesses that are actually employing them and actually teaching them and give them an opportunity. And again, that always makes me feel great to actually see people, not for just their disabilities, but the simple fact of the matter is they just want to work just like you and me. They just want to be productive citizens like you and me. So again, I just thought that was pretty cool to watch. Another thing that's pretty cool to watch, but I didn't because usually I don't watch NASCAR, but I'm going to report this anyway, that Bubba Wallace did make history this past Monday, becoming the second black driver to win a NASCAR Cup Series race. He did actually win the race in Talladega, so which I thought was pretty cool because, again, it's NASCAR, the League of Left Turns. We're just now getting around to where Michael Jordan is co-owning a actual racing team in NASCAR, and there's actually some people. There are actually some black, and you know, contrary to popular belief, there are some black people in NASCAR, especially in the pit crew changes. I actually showed a feel-good story a month ago, I believe, where it talked about one of the women were actually one of the was actually on one of the NASCAR pit crews right now, which I thought was pretty cool because let's be honest, I'll say this once and I'll say this again. NASCAR is those last bastions of sports that we are slowly creeping into. It's just like gymnastics for guys. I mean, you see guys all the time flipping and tumbling in your neighborhoods. I'm like, you know, if we didn't have such a bias about gymnastics, about a guy doing gymnastics, man, we would dominate that sport. That's all I'm saying. Because I'm gonna say I've seen guys do stuff in gyms and on the street and in football fields that the same thing they could turn around and do in the Olympics or in gymnastics competition if we just drop the stigma. That's all I'm saying. Man, we would dominate. But again, shout out to Bubba Wallace as far as winning Talladega. That's a big one in the world of NASCAR. And finally, this story I did actually play on the midweek review, but I still want to play it again because this child is actually the epitome of what we want to be when we get our own plot of land and we get our own homes, that we should be growing our own gardens. And this kid at 6 years old has got it down.
Celebrate America's farmers here, and tonight the children determined to build the next great farms. Tonight in South Fulton, Georgia, 6-year-old Kendall Ray Johnson telling us she's been gardening half her life.
Hi, David. Welcome to my farm.
Giving us a tour of her own farm, her backyard.
Tomato. See?
And just listen to how proud she is of her bell peppers.
This is a bell pepper. You mean, it's amazing.
Dad Quentin doing the trimming.
This is my dad trimming some of the okra. Daddy.
Hi. Children all over town come over to learn how to garden.
I can pick one.
And the new honor, the state of Georgia honoring Kendall Ray for her work, officially naming her the youngest certified farmer in that state.
My garden is my favorite part of my house. I grow carrots and they are delicious.
And she's not alone. Children across this country determined to be the future farmers of America. In Wausau, Wisconsin, 500 fourth graders from D.C. Everest School District spending their days at Foosted Farms, learning from high school students.
Hi, David.
Fourth grader Haley Borkhart, just back from the farm.
I learned all about it. Cows at the Foos farm. We got to see bunnies and horses and ducks. We got to pet the bunnies. Bye, David.
Little Haley sharing her love of gardening, of farming with Kendall Ray. And tonight, Kendall Ray's mother, Ursula.
Her mission is to meet new friends, make new things, and to inspire other kids.
Well, she's inspired us. Kendall Ray, Haley, all of our...
And again, I just thought that was cool. Just because of the fact of the matter, at 6 years old, 6 years old, 6 years old, Nari has a great idea about raising her own crops and things of that nature, and actually having a garden. It's one of my future goals. It's like when me and the future missus, whoever she may be, when we finally get our home together, and it's like, I want to have a garden. I mean, I want to have a lot of things in that backyard, but yeah, I do want to have a garden. I do want to grow my own vegetables and fruits. You know, to have an apple tree or an orange tree or grapes on the grapevine, things of that nature. I would love to have a little mini greenhouse to where I can have all this to happen. I'll be the first person to say it. I would look forward to it. But again, it just goes to show you that, having dreams like that, no matter how young you are, you can still be able to accomplish those things. I thought that was pretty cool. So that's going to do it for our podcast, guys. Do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know we're live. I certainly appreciate it. Before we get out of here, you got to do some shameless plugging. I do want to talk about my buddy Big VZA Dot, which you can definitely find him, Avon Westwood, on Facebook, or Big VZA Dot on socials, as he does have a couple of podcasts of his own. The Smoking Trailers every Sunday from 6:30 to 9 p.m., which he shows he shows movies and video game trailers you might find interesting. And every Tuesday, he has the RAF podcast from 6:30 to 9 p.m., in which he basically does like, how do I always say this? It's basically like America's Funniest Home Videos done by World Star. But definitely check him out, Avon Westwood, on Facebook, or Big VZA on the socials, as he also has a gaming thing called Making Plays. So definitely check him out as well. Now, as for yours truly, the link at the bottom that you see there, copy paste that into your browser, will take you to my link tree that has all of my Facebook and YouTube groups for all of my shows, How the Frack We Got Here, the Influence Podcast, and Get Bit. My IG handle, BlackFox447. Definitely follow me there, as I do like to post movie reviews, video game reviews, and just funny stuff sometimes. Inspirational stuff when it hits me. So definitely find me there as well. Quick programming note tonight, let's try that again, because that was good and terrible. Quick programming change tonight. We will be doing another live off of this podcast, so it's just going to be very late. So if you are able to watch it, please tune in to my Facebook page of William Buchanan. I would certainly appreciate it. Again, guys, before we wrap this up, I cannot stress this enough. Please get vaccinated. Please get your booster shots when they become available. Please wear a mask when you're out and about. COVID is still high, cases are still high, the ICU beds are still being taken up. People who need life-saving treatment, transplants, or things of that nature are unable to actually get that because the beds are basically being taken up by COVID patients. Let's do the world a favor. Let's do what needs to be done in order for us to get better in life. And at the same time, wearing a mask, getting vaccinated helps us out. It's not just about you, because the consequences of your choices affect other people. So, get vaccinated if you haven't already done it. Please wear a mask, because that's what I try to do when I'm out and about on a daily basis, because that's the only way we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy. That's all I'm saying. That being said, the last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We're not trying to change minds, persuade people, or force you to our way of thinking. We are just simply doing what the news stations of old try to do. Give you all the facts and allow you to make up your own mind for yourself. We do a lot better as a society once we're informed. We are progressive, we move forward, we try to right the wrongs of our history, and we do the things that should have been done a long time ago. Like elect our first Madam Vice President who is black, still hoping out for Michelle Obama to bring her husband in 2024, because trust me, you thought the midterms were going to be bad. Wait till the next election. That being said, guys, thank you all for watching. If you're watching this on the playback, please comment if it's live. I still want to know what you guys thought about what we talked about. And if there's certain stories or categories that you feel that we missed, or you want us to look into, to research, and then bring it to the masses, please reach out to me at Off Limits Podcast, at not Off Limits Podcast. That's a terrible segue. Please reach out to me at How the Frack We Got Here on Facebook, or my own Facebook page of William Buchanan, or my IG page at BlackBox447, and we'll try to do our best to accommodate you. Take care of yourselves and each other, guys, and we will get through this. Have a good weekend. Peace.